it is Jazz here. It is time for the September book excerpt reading. You guys and one of my friends on Instagram voted that I should read an excerpt from Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. I really love this book, so I'm very excited to read from it today. And a little kind of summary slash where we are in the story for this excerpt, so you get it, is basically this is a story about a little mouse named Mrs. Frisby, and she is widowed and has 4 children. Her youngest son, Timothy, has gotten sick, and she needs to move house so that they don't get hurt when the farmer on the farm decides to plow the fields. So she needs somebody to help her move, or some way to move, so that Timothy, who is sick, will not, perish. And so she has asked for the help of a crow named Jeremy in this scene, and he has offered to fly her on his back to ask for help from an owl. And the owl is supposed to give her some advice so that she can move on moving day. And that is the gist of this. And let's jump in to the excerpt reading. Said Jeremy in a low voice.
Here's where he lives. Should I get down?
Instinctively, Mrs. Frisby spoke in a whisper.
Yes, we've got to walk closer, but quietly. He doesn't like loud noises. It's so high.
She still clung to the crow's back.
But the limb is broad. You'll be safe enough.
And indeed, the limb was almost as wide as a sidewalk. Mrs. Frisby gathered her courage, slithered down, and felt the solid wood under her feet. Still, she could not help thinking about how far it was to the ground below.
There he is,
said Jeremy, staring at the hole.
It's just the right time.
They inched their way along the limb, Mrs. Frisby gripping the rough bark tightly, being careful not to stumble. And as they came closer, she could dimly perceive a shape like a squat vase sitting back in the hollow of the tree. Near the top of the vase, wide apart, 2 round yellow eyes glowed in the dark.
He can't see us. It's still too light.
Perhaps not, but he could hear, for now a deep round voice, a voice like an organ tone, echoed out of the hollow trunk. Who is standing outside my house?
Sir, I am a crow. My name is Jeremy. I've got a friend. I hope we have not disturbed you. My friend needs your advice.
I see. And can your friend not speak for himself?
Sir, my friend is a lady mouse.
A mouse? The sonorous voice sounded unbelieving. Why should a crow be a friend to a mouse?
I was trapped, sir, and she set me free. She saved me from the cat.
That is possible, though unusual. I've heard of such a thing before. We all help one another against the cat.
True. Now, sir, my friend herself is in trouble.
I understand. The owl, moving closer to the round entrance of his hollow. Mrs. Mouse, I cannot see you, for the glare of the daylight is too bright. But if you will step inside my house, I will listen to what you have to say. Mrs. Frisby hesitated. She knew something of the dietary habits of owls, and she did not much like the idea of being trapped in his house. Finally, she said timidly,
Sir, I would not wish to intrude, and I can hear you quite well from out here.
Mrs. Mouse, please understand that I have no interest at all, as a general rule, of helping mice solve their problems. If you have indeed saved a bird from a cat, I will spare you a few minutes. But I do not discuss problems with people I cannot see. Either step inside, or tell your friend to take you home again. Behind her, Mrs. Frisby heard Jeremy whisper very softly.
It's all right. He wouldn't harm you in his own home. I hope not.
She walked up the limb to the hollow, climbed up the sill, and stepped inside. Up close, the owl looked very large. Each of his feathery feet was tipped with 5 gleaming talons, an inch long. His beak was curved and sharp and cruel. He blinked his yellow eyes and said, "Please step across from the room, away from the light." Mrs. Frisby did as she was told. When she got near the nest, she stopped and faced the owl, who had turned from the light of the doorway and was peering at her with great yellow eyes. Jeremy was nowhere to be seen. She could only hope he was still waiting on the limb outside. "Now you may state your problem." Mrs. Frisby began nervously, trying to arrange her thoughts.
It's about my youngest son, Timothy. He's sick, too sick to leave his bed, and moving day is only 5 days off.
Wait, moving from where to where?
From the garden patch where we're living to the edge of the pasture by the stream.
Which garden? It had not occurred to Mrs. Frisby until now that a bird, flying freely over miles of countryside, would look down on many gardens.
It belongs to Mr. Fitzgibbon.
The one with the large stone?
Yes, my house is near the stone.
What makes you so sure that moving day will come in 5 days? Mrs. Frisby told him about the tractor and what Mr. Fitzgibbon had said, 5 days until plowing.
Of course, it might turn cold again and freeze, or even snow.
No, it will not. The wild onions are already up in the pastures. He asked her then what kind of house she had, and exactly where it was in relation to the big stone. Apparently he knew the spot well. But the more she talked to him, the more Mrs. Frisby became convinced that he would produce no solution to her problem. It had been foolish of her to think he could, foolish of her to come at all, because she thought there really was no solution. At last she fell silent, and the owl asked no more questions. Finally he said, "Lying where it does, your house will inevitably be turned up by the plow and probably broken to bits in the process. There is no feasible way to prevent this. My only advice to you is this. If you stay in your house, you will surely be crushed and killed, all of you. Therefore, it is better to take your chances and move. Wrap your son Timothy up as well as you can, help him as much as possible on the journey, and hope for warm weather on moving day. That way you are at least sure to save yourself and the other children." The owl paused, turned away from her, and looked again at the entrance of the hollow. The patch of light it emitted was growing steadily dimmer. "And now, if you will excuse me, the night is falling, and I have no more time to spare. I am sorry that I could not give you a more satisfactory solution. I don't believe you've told me your name."
Mrs. Frisby.
The poor mouse spoke with a sob in her throat, for the owl had said exactly what she feared he would say, and she had no real hope for Timothy. The owl had said, in effect, either Timothy alone must die, or they must all die together. Even if moving day should be extraordinarily warm, the nights were sure to be frosty, and that would be the end of him. Still, one must be polite, and she added sadly,
I thank you, sir, for listening to me.
But at the mention of her name, an extraordinary change had come over the owl. He turned to face her again and stared at her most intently. Indeed, he gave an agitated flutter of his wings and half flew, half hopped closer to her, bending forward until his great sharp beak was only a few inches from her face. Mrs. Frisby shrank back in fear. What had she done wrong? "Did you say Mrs. Frisby?"
Yes, you asked my name.
"Related to Jonathan Frisby?"
Yes, he was my husband. He died last summer. He was Timothy's father. But how did you know about him?
"That is not important," said the owl, drawing back a little and looking at her in a new way, almost as if with deference. "I will say this. His name was not unknown in these woods, and if you are his widow, that puts things in a different light." Something in the way he said this caused Mrs. Frisby's hopes to lift a little.
What do you mean?
"I mean, madame, that there is a way your son's life might possibly be saved. I did not mention it before because I thought there was no way you could conceivably do it, and I did not wish to raise false hope. But if you are Jonathan Frisby's widow, then perhaps it can be done."
I don't understand at all. What is this thing?
It is not a thing I can do myself. You must go to the rats.
To the rats? But I don't know any rats. They have nothing to do with me.
I don't doubt that. They have little to do with anyone except themselves, and will have less as time goes on. Nevertheless, I think they can help you, and if they will, they can.
But what can they do?
They must move your house to a place where it will be safe from the plow. And now Mrs. Frisby's spirits fell again, and she said almost bitterly,
You are joking, sir. You are not serious. No rat could move my house. It is far too heavy, much too big.
The rats on Mr. Fitzgibbon's farm have things, ways, that you know nothing about. They are not like the rest of us. They are not, I think, like any other rats. They work at night in secret. Mrs. Frisby, do you know their main entrance?
In the rose bush? Yes.
Go there. You will find a sentry guarding the door. His name is Justin. Tell him who you are, and that you come at my request. Tell him that you wish to see a rat named Nicodemus. I think they will let you in, but they may insist on swearing you to secrecy. If they should ask this, you, of course, must use your own judgment, but my advice would be to do as they ask. Mrs. Frisby was close to complete bewilderment.
Secrecy? Secrecy about what?
That I cannot reveal. I, too, have agreed to it. Also, there is much I do not know, though I have provided advice on certain aspects of their projects.
Well, I don't understand it all, but if you think it will save Timothy, I will try to do what you said.
Tell them that I suggest to move the house into the lee of the stone. Remember that, the lee of the stone. And don't forget the names Justin and Nicodemus.
Justin, Nicodemus, the lee of the stone. I will remember.
And Mrs. Frisby, please understand that I was a great admirer of your late husband, though I never met him. I wish you well, and hope your son's life can be saved. That was my excerpt reading of Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. I hope you guys will be inspired to check out this book because it is a really great book no matter what age you are. I have linked the book below in the description if you want to check it out. And that is it for today, my fabulous peeps. I will see you all soon. Bye! And to the hollow. Nope, my brain died. That's an outtake. Nope, my brain died. That was a true squeak because I choked on my own spit, but I think it worked for the scene. House will inevitably be... It's hard to say inevitably like a ow. Inevitable... I can't say it. Inevitably be... Shoot.
Now, because you're getting ready to cover up your mouth.
I do that when it has a lot of comments. It would be easier if my glasses would stay on.
This is why I hate glasses.
And do remember the names Justice and Justin? Justice?
If you think it will save Timothy.
I can't say my own son's name. Said the L. The L? Not the owl, the L. A bird flying fleely of the stone. He has no fingers, so that's not going to work. Really, dogs?
I hear you bad, dogs.
Wrap your son Okay, we'll finish this sentence. Dude, I almost called it the wrong title. The Secret of NIMH. That's the name of the movie.